Hello, everyone, in the room and online. I'm Wendy Chang. I'm Director of Rennie Collection. I'm also a proud trustee for AAMC and AAMC Foundation, serving on the fundraising committee. So I'm always available to talk to. As someone who has taken a somewhat atypical path to curatorial work, I'm especially pleased to be able to introduce our final panel, Outside, Inside, which is organized and moderated by Shoshona Resnikoff, Dummer Curator of 20th and 21st Century Design at Milwaukee Art Museum. Traditionally, museums have been viewed as gatekeepers of culture, with curators and art professionals having the authority to decide what artwork is showcased and presented to the public. This approach can lead to a narrow and exclusionary perspective that perpetuates systemic biases of inequality and erasure. Empowering individuals outside the museum professional field as documenters and curators of their own stories and art offers an approach to creating more inclusive exhibitions and programs. The principle of nothing for us without us recognizes that these voices and perspectives are essential to understanding and representing the full spectrum of human experience. By providing platforms and resources for these perspectives, institutions can build bridges with communities, especially communities that have historically been excluded from the museum experience. This can help foster trust and create a democratic and participatory approach to cultural production and dissemination. In line with its mission to advocate for the importance of curatorial practice, AAMC recognizes that curatorial work is not done in a vacuum. It requires collaboration and dialogue with a diverse range of individuals and communities. And now we're about to hear some thoughtful dialogue from our panelists, Catherine Kasdorf, Associate Curator, Arts of Asia and the Islamic World, Detroit Institute of Art, Rebecca Mendes, artist, designer, and chair at UCLA Design Media Arts, and Laura Lee Wastasakut, curator of Indigenous Art and Engagement Legacy Art Galleries at the University of Victoria, Canada. And I welcome our panelists.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Wendy, and thank you all for being here for this last panel. It hits different on this side of the stage, I'll say. This is my first time up here, and I am just really honored to be able to be up here with these wonderful panelists and to also be with Rebecca, who's coming in from California virtually. And I'm particularly grateful for her being up and awake and ready to go with the time difference. I also just wanted to thank Judith, Lucy, Emma, and the whole AAMC staff for these incredible few days. I'm particularly grateful to Judith and Lucy for their patience and support as we planned this panel while I was also moving cross country and beginning a new job. So shout out to them. I also wanted to thank three colleagues, Marianne LaMonica, who's a past AAMC board president, and Doctors Julio Capo and Rebecca Friedman at Florida International University, my former employer. It was Dr. Capo's collaboration with History Miami for an exhibition on queer Miami history, and Dr. Friedman's ongoing engagement with the artist and photojournalist Carl Just that helped to inform this panel, and I'm grateful for their intellectual leadership. As museums have made strides in incorporating voices from beyond the institution, quote, inside curators, and I'm going to be doing a lot of just assume air quotes around inside and outside, because these are problematic terms, and I'm very much aware of that. Inside curators have grappled with the challenges and opportunities, some of them expected and some of them surprising, that emerge from this approach. Meanwhile, quote unquote, outside curators or co-creators have brought new insight into collections and exhibitions and have also gained their own valuable view and opportunities for critique from outside organizations. Today, we're going to be attempting to explore these dynamics from the perspectives of institutions, community members, and artists, and also ask what long-term impacts these relationships and projects can have on an institution and its culture. I've asked our panelists to share a bit about specific projects or sets of projects that they feel fit into this dynamic. And following their presentations, we'll have a brief and lively conversation. To begin, though, I'd like to start by introducing Catherine Kasdorf. She is Associate Curator of Arts of Asia and the Islamic World at the DIA, and her curatorial projects include new permanent collection galleries at the Detroit Institute of Art and the Walters Art Museum, where she previously held a Weiler-Mellon postdoctoral curatorial fellowship, as well as the Walters exhibition, Ferocious Beauty, Wrathful Deities from Tibet and Nepal. With her colleagues, she is currently planning an exhibition that will bring together a group of now dispersed Yogini goddess sculptures from Tamil Nadu, which will explore their many transformations over a 1,000-year history. Catherine?
Great. Thank you so much, Shoshana, for the introduction and for inviting me to be part of this panel. Slides. Okay, I'm very much looking forward to hearing from my co-panelists, and I'm looking forward to our discussion today. So as the only curator of Asian, Islamic, and ancient Middle Eastern art at the Detroit Institute of Arts, I can't pretend to be the sole authority for all the areas of the collection that I oversee, and my own background is in South Asian art. So I value many types of collaboration with colleagues from both inside and outside the museum. Many of them are academic experts, but today I want to focus on some experiences collaborating with individuals with other types of expertise who have traditionally been excluded from the inner workings of art museums. Oops. In the brief time I have today, if I can advance my slide, there we go. I'll outline the various strategies of community engagement and co-creation that the DIA employed while planning the museum's Asian galleries, which opened in November 2018, with the Japanese gallery opening 1 year earlier than that. Now, I arrived at the museum in May of 2017, about midway through the project's timeline, and I was not directly involved in every stage of the process that I'll be discussing today. But insights from every stage of community engagement informed the final galleries, and I think that they're stronger because of the multiplicity of voices that contributed to the process. So since its museum-wide reinstallation in 2007, the DIA has been a leader in visitor-centered, community-engaged exhibition strategies. But in developing the Asian galleries, the museum involved community members on an unprecedented level. In addition to speaking meaningfully to broad audiences, it was a high priority to create galleries that would resonate with people who identify with the cultural regions that the galleries are supposed to represent. On this slide, you can see some of our community collaborators, as well as a list showing different roles of non-staff participants in the project. So in the early stages of planning, the DIA hired 11 community members as paid consultants to work together with staff and consulting content experts on identifying objects of interest and developing a range of potential storylines for the new galleries. These community consultants were mostly from the Detroit metro area, and the majority of them self-identified as belonging to one or more Asian American community. None of them had a professional background in art history, and that was a purposeful choice on the part of the DIA, but they all had an interest in art and lifelong learning, and they participated in workshops to learn about the collection and to think through themes and concepts that the DIA's objects could highlight. Then following the work with community consultants, the DIA team of curatorial and interpretation staff further developed and refined the ideas and checklists, then tested them with focus groups. Through 7 sessions with focus groups comprised of people from different Asian American communities, as well as general visitors, the team was able to gauge how people were responding to the ideas under development. Then after refining these ideas further, the DIA team conducted in-community consultations. That is, we went to places such as the Korean American Cultural Center and the Chinese Community Center to present our plans for the galleries and get more targeted feedback within a setting that was familiar and comfortable to the people that we were talking with. In some cases, the feedback from the focus groups and in-community consultations confirmed that we were on the right track. And in other cases, it helped us reframe how we presented certain objects in the galleries. And I can describe some specific examples during discussion. Then finally, in the later stages of the project, we tested a selection of label drafts and prototypes of digital interactives with visitors. Staff from our Department of Evaluation facilitated this visitor testing, which again helped us refine the content of interpretive elements that went into the galleries. So after the galleries had been open for a few months, my colleagues Allison Jean and Swarupa Anila, members of the Department of Interpretation who led much of the community engagement initiative, published an article in the spring 2019 issue of the journal Exhibition, in which they summarized the process of co-creating the DIA's Asian galleries with community consultants. And in this article, they offer reflections and recommendations on their experiences. So if anybody here is interested in engaging in similar work at your museum, I recommend this article to you. And I'd just like to highlight one more part of the Asian Galleries project, which welcomes ongoing feedback from visitors. At the center of the suite of galleries is this response station, in which we invite visitors to share their thoughts on the galleries and perhaps something about themselves. As we were developing ideas for the galleries, many community consultants and focus group participants emphasized their desire to see themselves reflected in the galleries, to see their cultures represented. But our collection does not allow us to do this for every Asian and Asian American community. And we acknowledge this fact in this response station, and we invite visitors to share their own stories. And you can read the prompt on the screen. In addition to cards that visitors contribute, which are lotus-shaped, we feature 7 responses from some of the community members who participated in discussions with the DIA as we were developing the galleries. Their responses to the prompt are hung inside octagonal frames, and their picture appears alongside their words. Now, lastly, I don't have much time to get into it now, but I wanted to briefly mention a new exhibition project I'm working on, which was also in the introduction, which aims to reunite a group of sculptures from southern India, carved between the late 9th and mid-10th century, which once shared a temple and but what are now dispersed across museum collections, mostly in North America and Europe, although one is in India. Most of the sculptures represent goddesses known as yoginis, and one represents the god Shiva. In the exhibition, we plan to trace the movements of these sculptures from their original temple to multiple later homes, to their export from India during the colonial period, to the museums where they reside today. And we've already begun some very informative community engagement work. It's informing some of our choices as we continue to plan this exhibition, and perhaps I'll have a chance to say more during the discussion. So thanks.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I'm so excited to talk about these projects with you. But our next presenter is Loralee Wastasekut, who is an Innu I know, I practiced. I'm so sorry. Loralee's ancestral roots stem from Pegui First Nation, York Factory, and the Red River, where she grew up in Winnipeg, Manitoba. She relocated to Victoria, British Columbia in 2010 to pursue her education and hold a degree in political science from the University of Victoria. In 2021, Loralee was given the inaugural title of Curator of Indigenous Art and Engagement at University of Victoria's Legacy Art Gallery. She has curated major exhibitions such as We Carry Our Ancestors in 2019 and On Beaded Ground in 2021, and is currently working on a solo exhibition, Walking Through My Fires, with Kwakwakiwak artist Francis Dick.
Thank you, Shoshana. I just want to shout out to Judith and Lucy for inviting me here today. I also want to start with acknowledging the territory of the Lenape people on whose territory I'm visiting. I am a stranger in a strange land, and I'm really grateful to be here today. I am the curator of Indigenous Art and Engagement at the University of Victoria Legacy Art Galleries. And I work with a large collection of Pacific Northwest Coast art that we steward and take care of. We also steward and care for all of the Indigenous art located throughout the faculties and campus of the University of Victoria. I came to this work as a total outsider. First of all, beginning with my political science degree, working as a curator in an art gallery. But for me, as an Indigenous person, I believe that politics and art, especially for Indigenous people, go hand in hand. I am an intergenerational residential school survivor. My father, Jim, attended the Mackay Indian Residential School in Dauphin, Manitoba for 12 years of his life. And my mother and father met at that institution and married. Been married for 54 years. That is also how I actually came into this work and began working at the University of Victoria Legacy. How do I, okay. So my story begins in the gallery with this exhibition called There's Truth Here that was curated by my mentor, Dr. Andrea Walsh. This exhibition featured the work of children from 4 different Indian residential and day schools in Canada. One of them being my dad's residential school, the Mackay Indian Residential School, as well as the Alberni Indian Residential School, the Inkamik Day School, and the St. Michael's Indian Residential School in Alert Bay. So this exhibition brought together survivors and our families to work with Andrea to exhibit our paintings. In 2015, I was made aware of a painting that my dad created at the Mackay School when he was 10 years old. And the man who taught them art in the evening, Robert Aller, recognized that art was an important part of healing and an important part of getting these children through these institutions. And so he had worked with children in the late 50s, early 60s, and collected these children's paintings that he helped the kids create in the art classes over the years. And when he passed away in 2008 in Port Alberni, he donated those collections, that collection of children's paintings to the university. So in 2015, when I started my political science degree at the university, I became aware of this painting that my dad made when he was 10. And I felt that this was a very kind of serendipitous experience that, you know, I realized at this time, okay, this is why I moved to Victoria, was to find my dad's painting and see that it's returned. So we worked on that repatriation as a team with Andrea and the Legacy Art Galleries. And those paintings have been returned in ceremony in December 2021 back to the Mackay residential school survivors. And so how I came to this work is deeply personal. You know, the painting that my dad created and the paintings that the other children created in these schools really show their resilience and the love that they still carried, that was never destroyed by the schools, no matter what they tried to do to us. Those children recorded a moment in time, and those are the most important voices, is those children who have documented historically what was going on in their minds and in their hearts and in their feelings. So our painting sits in our dining room in Peguis, where I'm from, and it's a very important reminder of what my dad survived living all those years in that school. Here are some photos of my mentor and I, Dr. Andrea Walsh, unveiling a painting to a survivor, the late Amelia Wavy Saunders. The other photo with the 4 groups of people are my dad and then my mother, Karen, and 2 other residential school survivors from the Mackay School, who were our partners in a SSHRC grant that made the repatriation possible. And then another photo of me and another survivor from the Alberni Indian Residential School who also had a painting returned back to him. And our former director, Mary Jo Hughes, who is another big mentor in my life and in this work that I do. This work is very intergenerational. Those connections and relationships are very important in keeping this work going. On the left, I have a picture of me, my daughter Brooklyn, my mother Karen, and one of our collaborators and allies, Dr. Maureen Matthews from the Manitoba Museum, who has taken on the care of the continued care of our paintings in the sacred storage area of the Manitoba Museum, where they're regularly visited and cared for by an elder. And so we're through this work, I've come to know really wonderful and beautiful people like Maureen. The next picture is of me and my daughter unraveling, taking out the paintings and bringing them out for the families to view their paintings. This is where I first saw the paintings in the visual anthropology lab at the Cornett building at the University of Victoria. And spent a lot of time in there looking at all of the paintings, and they're very, very powerful. It's like opening up a box of spirits, you know, when you feel the power of the paintings and you know what the children put into them. There's a picture of me and my dad and my mom when we just finished seeing my dad's painting, which was a very nerve-wracking experience because I had no idea what he painted. It could have been a monster, you know, it could have been, I don't know, but I was absolutely sick to my stomach that morning before I saw that painting. But when we finally went up to see the painting, my dad let out this big sigh of relief. And then me and my mom stepped up and we looked down, and it was this beautiful painting of him, a self-portrait of him and his mother and father and his little baby sister. I think it's his baby sister. My auntie's here visiting, Brenda. I think that's you, Brenda, in the corner. So yeah, that's how I came to this work, was through my dad's painting. And I just included a beautiful ancestor piece, a beaded moss bag made in Manitoba by a grandmother, and our relationship with Maureen Matthews has really allowed us that access to these types of pieces in collections in our home territory of Manitoba. So there's another picture of my mom. We're just checking out all of the beautiful things in the collection. And that's really important for Indigenous people to have that access to our things. This is the current exhibition that I have just co-curated with Francis Stick, who is a Kwakwaka'wakw artist, a very prolific artist, and who is also a residential school survivor. And I thought it was important to raise her up and provide her space to speak her truth through her art. And you know, our collection has major gaps in it, in which Indigenous women are not quite as visible as even Indigenous men in the collection. A very marginalized group. That's true for the art world, but it's also true within the society of Canadian society. We are very marginalized. On May 5th, we just had a National Day of Action for the missing and murdered Indigenous women that continue to go missing and are killed to this day. Um, so this exhibition will run through until September 9th. So if you're ever in Victoria, BC, please come by. This is just the photo of the actual installation of Frances's exhibition. And there's Frances beaming with pride in front of her portrait series. It's been wonderful to do a solo exhibition with Frances. I love doing solo exhibitions, I find, because it provides a deeper experience and builds, I've built a really good relationship with Frances and a friendship. And she is literally one of our gallery neighbors. So she lives right in the neighborhood, 2 streets over. So it's wonderful when I get to do that and actually say that, I'm supporting an Indigenous woman doing contemporary art who lives just next door. So this is, again, Frances does many, many different types of art. She collaborates in the making of guitars, furniture. And within this exhibition, there is an installation called When I Was 5. Frances, at the age of 5, went to residential school. And this is sort of a tribute to residential school children, the survivors, and honors the children that never made it home. So the desks are old desks, repurposed desks that were gifted to Frances through friends and family, and she began this desk reclamation project in which she reclaims these desks and puts art on them. Some of them have been collaborations with other friends and family or artists that she knows. And they are lit up with lights that respond directly to the soundscape that we created in the inner gallery of Frances telling stories and drumming and singing. This is the previous exhibition that I curated on Beaded Ground, which featured a lot of local artists in Victoria as well as in Vancouver. This was a group exhibition, and it featured historical beaded pieces from our collection, as well as contemporary works created by the artists. This is an example of some of the pieces that we have in our collection that we are considering repatriating back to other communities. These photos are of some crow dolls made by a holy woman, Winona Plenty Hoops, who is a Crow woman. Yeah, we have a lot of these things in our collection that are made by Indigenous women, but this is a very rare example of actually where an Indigenous woman her name is attached to her work. Many of the pieces, like the baskets and the beading, which have been made by Indigenous women, often have no names attached to them. So it was really nice to see that somebody took the time to write her name down and find out who she is and where she's from, because that historically hasn't happened with donors and collectors and institutions. In this exhibition, as I said, there was some contemporary work. This is a piece by Estrella Wheatung, We Are Star People. It kind of comments on the colonial heteropatriarchy that queer, two-spirit people living in Indigenous communities face, and also highlights the importance of those intergenerational relationships again, and the importance of our elders and our children. And also highlights, the fact that Algonquin people, our creation stories begin with the stars. this was my first exhibition that I curated, called We Carry Our Ancestors. And this featured baskets from our collection. And as I said, you know, many of these baskets had no names attached to them. That information does not exist within our collection databases. And I worked with about 135 baskets from our collection, all of them were unnamed except for 6. So there was 6 women that were attached to their baskets. And then I did some more investigating work. I worked to find out an additional maybe 6 basket makers through just researching different people's basketry collections and doing community research. I was able to name those women and put their names with their baskets in our collection. So I made a little bit of a dent there. Yeah, I had placed the baskets, the historical baskets, alongside many contemporary baskets that were part of the show as well. One of them being made by Brenda Crabtree, who is just think retired from Emily Carr University in Vancouver. But Brenda was a part of the exhibition. And she created those baskets on the left. And she learned from her grandmother on the upper right, Matilda Andrew. And so there she is holding her grandmother's basket. And, you know, just wanted to highlight that just how intergenerational this work is that's happening. And just that, you know, it's just really important also to highlight that, you know, like we're still here, we're still making baskets. Indigenous women are very, it's just really, really important to have, to give voices to outside people like Indigenous women artists. And yeah, I think I'll wrap it up there. I'm sure I could talk about more stuff, but thank you so much.
Thank you, Rebecca. I'm sorry, thank you, Lauralee. And our last presenter before our conversation is Rebecca and her cat, who has made an appearance. Rebecca Mendez is an artist, designer, and chair at UCLA Design Media Arts, where she's the founder and director of the Counterforce Lab, a research and fieldwork studio with a focus on ecological arts and justice. Her research and practice investigate design and media art in public space, critical approaches to public identities and landscape, and artistic projects based on field investigation methods. Rebecca was the first and only Latina to win the Cooper Union National Design Award in Communication Design 2012, the AIGA Medal in 2017, and induction to the One Club Hall of Fame in 2017. Her solo exhibitions include projects at SF MoMA, Anchorage Museum, Laguna Art Museum, Nevada Art Museum, and the Museum of Contemporary Art, Oaxaca, among others. Rebecca, we welcome your presentation.
Thank you, Shoshana, and thank you everyone for inviting me to this panel. It is great to share the stage with all of you. So I'll just be showing one project, the Cooper Hewitt, and I just want to make sure that I'm not seeing the slides, so so let's say next, and if you guys are seeing this, let's see, then we're in the good place. Where is it? This. I don't know how to make it focus. That was funny. Okay, so led by curator Kara McCarthy and Christina de Leon, the Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum invited me as guest curator for their series called Selects. In their words, providing a platform for provocative visual discoveries, the Select series invites designers, writers, and cultural figures to explore and interpret objects in the Cooper Hewitt's collection and the Smithsonian collection at large. So combing through the Smithsonian's institution-wide collection database, which was incredibly overwhelming, I mean, thousands and thousands of objects that I was looking at, I began weaving together ideas regarding the theme of our relationship to animals and posthumanism. I wanted to express a vision of the world where all living beings, plants, animals, and humans are considered equal inhabitants of the planet. Next. And here's just a glimpse of the final exhibition installation for context. But let me get back to the beginning. I chose to focus on birds, which are my passion and at the core of my research for the last 2 decades. Next. But it was this quote by American author Barry Lopez from his book, Crossing Open Ground, that inspired this exhibition. Particularly disturbing is the time Hernando Cortés set fire to Tenochtitlan, present-day Mexico City, burning fruit orchards, flowers, and aviaries after Moctezuma balked at colonialization. Cortés's destruction symbolizes the long-term failure of Western civilization to recognize the intrinsic worth of the American landscape, Lopez writes, and its potential value to human societies that have since come to be at odds with the natural world. I was born and raised in Mexico City, where I studied the aviaries of Moctezuma Xocoyotzin, the 9th emperor of the Aztec Empire in Tenochtitlan. And my research is rooted in decolonial practices. So these connections were uncanny. Next. I began in the 16th century at the moment of contact between the Aztec and the Spanish. Early documents provide rich descriptions illuminating the relationships between humans and birds in the Aztec Empire. Next. Several accounts detail the magnificent bird collection of Moctezuma Xocoyotzin. Next. In this map of Tenochtitlan from 1524, you can see at the center the aviaries depicted with 9 birds in a grid. Next. I proposed the idea to exhibit the design objects from the Cooper Hewitt's collection together with bird specimens from Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History. Design and science have a lot in common. Both disciplines use rigor, time, and repetition, as well as curiosity and prolonged structured explorations as defined attributes. Picture here is Smithsonian forensic ornithologist Roxy Colley-Leyburn. This image reminds us that extraction, the killing of thousands of birds for research, is still in practice. Next. And here we are selecting specimens of bald eagles, Arctic terns, and golden eagles. Next. Selecting specimens of turquoise brown moths, barred ant shrikes, and summer tanagers. Connecting and studying the natural world was, next. Connecting with and studying the natural world was a central part of Aztec culture, which led Moctezuma's aviary to include many species from across the continent. By contrast, Cortés and his invading soldiers were motivated by greed for gold and material goods that eventually drove them to set fire to Tenochtitlan, burning the entire city and its people. The aviary birds were burnt alive, the most poetic, fragile, and beautiful aspect of the city, senselessly destroyed. For me, this moment represents a collision of 2 cultures, one that understood the natural world as source, and another culture that saw it as resource for extraction and prized wealth, amassing it at the expense of our planet. Next. For many indigenous cultures, birds have possessed a connection to the spirit world through their gift of flight. And today we see how birds have come to embody whole societies, serving as symbols of creation, stories, and patriotic pride. Next. 2 birds of prey exemplify countries that have defined my life. The golden eagle, venerated by the Aztecs and symbol of Mexico, where I was born and grew up, and the bald eagle, the national bird of the United States, where I have lived and worked throughout my professional career. Next. These birds, which have no concept of national borders or cultural differences, together highlight the symbolic power birds hold within two distinct cultures. Next. This exhibition examines the spectrum of human interactions with nature, from observation and study to extraction and eradication. Next. With the support of an incredible curatorial staff, I was able to select works from the museum's collections spanning across 500 years. Next. And next. Selected design objects, bird specimens, and rare books explore the tensions and dichotomies between humans and birds that have existed throughout time. Next. And next. Birds, and in particular their feathers, have continuously inspired innovation in design experiments with color, pattern, and form. Next. The Pantone color system was preceded by a classification method invented by Smithsonian's curator of bird, Robert Ridgway, in the 1800s. And I'm sorry, I have to move my cat away. God, don't get out of the way. It's just, he really wants to be part of the presentation. Okay, next, please. Here are skins of elegant trogons, bald eagles, and peregrine falcon. The use of skins, of bird skins in this exhibition was important to me as we continue to learn about the natural world by killing it. And next. I chose to have the resplendent quetzal as the only mounted bird in the exhibition for its significance in the Aztec culture. Next. And next. In the exhibition, there is a legal case of La Loma de los Estrada in Tenancingo, Mexico, from 1610 to 1930. This series of legal documents span 3 centuries and describe an unresolved legal case and reveal the genealogy of the Estrada family starting in 1610 until the last document written in 1930 to Mexico's chief of the Presidential Guard, General Salvador Sanchez, my grandfather, and on behalf of the Erasmo Estrada, my great-grand-uncle. Next, please. As an artistic intervention, I intend to continue the legal case that connects me to the conquest of my birthplace, the invasion and destruction of Tenochtitlan, and the genocide of its indigenous people. The usurped lands shall then return to the descendants of the Mexica people of the Aztec Empire. That's why it's an artistic intervention. That's not going to happen. But hey, I can make the case, right? I can really just make this be an intention that would be with wholeheartedly. In the next, please. In the exhibition, there are 2 interactive pieces. One seen here, introducing the viewer to Moctezuma's aviary. Next. And next. And next. And the second, visualizing Tenochtitlan and the Aztec featherwork. Next, please. For the artifact labels, I organized them with specific verbs. Here, for example, symbolized for the eagles. Others were objectified, focus on the Americas. Next, please. Invaded, where I focus on Moctezuma, Cortés, and the conquest. Next, please. Here for science, birds, and collecting, identified and invented for science and design. Next, please. Inspired for birds in flight. Next. Hunted for hunt, captivity, and cages. Nurtured for eggs. Feathered for feathers and featherworks. Next, please. It was important, the message that I wanted to convey in this exhibition, which is to teach that within the classification of the natural world, Organisms are divided and ranked in a way that underscores not only our difference, but also humankind's primary dominance over all other species, which has been a fundamental mistake. Next, please. I think that went with this image, the hunt. Next, please. I had 3 works in the exhibition, 1 focused on colonialism and 2 on my research around migratory seabirds, extinction, and climate change. You see the art print on the Arctic tern in the back and the circular video in the right, on the right. Next, please. This is a still image of the 29-minute video, Circumsolar Migration 1, where I focus on the Arctic tern circumbipolar migration, which has the longest migration of all creatures in the world. And you can see this film in my video on my website. And next, please. You can also read about the exhibition and download the catalog if you Google Rebecca Mendes Selects and the Cooper Hewitt. I know the link is in the next page. And again, I'm looking forward to your questions. Thank you so much. Thanks. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. I'm just so grateful to be able to revisit that exhibition and that installation and hear and learn more about your insight and process in what seems like a very complex undertaking. When I began speaking for this panel, I mentioned that I recognized that we had to put air quotes around inside and outside as concepts. From the outset, they felt like very nebulous, iffy, and problematic terms, and honestly, just the best ones that I could come up with to describe this ongoing dynamic and process as we try to expand voices within the institution. And so in discussion with our panelists, this came up, and I wanted to begin perhaps by interrogating those terms, thinking about the ways that they are, again, troubling, but also potentially quite expansive. And so Laura Lee, I'm going to begin with you, if you don't mind, because we discussed this. How does the idea of an outside curatorial voice sit with you? Is it inherently othering? And what does it mean for a curator like yourself who sits at the intersection of a collection formed by settler colonial practices, as well as a member of a community group that collection comes from?
Yeah, I guess when I first got the invitation to speak on this panel about inside and outside voices, I thought, well, I guess I'm an outsider. I did kind of feel like maybe, those terms were, othering. Who are those outside voices? Usually they're in my case, it's usually Indigenous people who are often seen as the outsiders coming into these institutions and these galleries. I'm hoping to change that narrative. It's kind of true, though, the way in which the museum and the gallery has created these inside voices and these outside voices. That's okay for me. I think I'm proud to be an outsider. I'm proud to be able to come into a gallery and offer a different perspective coming from an Indigenous woman like myself. Yeah, to be honest, I struggle a bit as an Indigenous person working in a university gallery, some of the things that happen in terms of race and inclusion and exclusion, yeah. I guess that's honestly, how I feel and how I felt when you introduced this panel to me. But I'm very grateful. I'm very happy to be here. So
Well, we're thrilled to have you. But also, I was struck by something else that you said in conversation, which was this idea of there being multiple kinds of inside and outside, and coming from an Indigenous community, but not necessarily the community in Victoria.
Yeah. So I am a Cree woman who is a visitor in the current territory in which I live. I live and work in the Lekwungen homelands of the Esquimalt and Songhees people, and I do walk very carefully. I realize that I am an Indigenous person, but I'm also a visitor in Victoria, and that's always first and foremost in my mind is, how do we support Indigenous artists, but how are we supporting local Indigenous artists from the territory in the work that I do and that the gallery does. So.
Thank you. And Rebecca, so much of this project at the Cooper Hewitt seems to have been informed, I think, I can't remember exactly how you put it, by this sort of creative imaginary potential as you're selecting these objects from across the collection. And so I'm wondering if you can speak to how this identity as an artist and as someone who's not from that institution sort of gave you a certain degree of freedom to work within the Smithsonian, an organization that I think most of us would define as pretty structured and institutionalized.
Thank you. Yes, and I think that, to me, what I loved about being an outsider, and I think that I have always felt as an outsider in all possible ways. The moment you're an artist, you're an outsider. The moment you're a woman, you're an outsider. The moment you are in the United States as a Mexican, you're an outsider. The moment you go to Mexico after having studied here, you are an outsider to Mexico. So I think that there's a certain resilience that you kind of like develop in that. You know that you will always be, that the rules will be set for you in a very different way, right? That it would be, everything will be kind of like quicksand. You're always standing in quicksand. So when I arrived to the Cooper Hewitt, what I love about it is that I didn't know the rules. I didn't know any limitations. I did not even want to know. But I always began by asking, is like, what do I want to do? What's the vision? And what was amazing about that is that not kind of having the insider tiptoeing that I'm sure you have to do in all institutions. It really allowed me to, from the very beginning, right? I wanted to be able to collaborate with all across the institutions. So we contacted the National Museum of the American Indian to be able to bring featherworks. Unfortunately, they were not being able to come up to be on loan. But even from the very beginning with the Natural History Museum was to bring all the extinct animals, right? And of course, they were not going to loan us any of those. So it's a lot about trying and being able to open doors where you don't even know there's a door. Right? When you don't even think that there is a door. So that idea that you bring as an outsider is of endless possibilities. And what was beautiful was to work with, an incredible curatorial staff and my fearless leader, who was Cristina de Leon, curator Cristina de Leon. Oh my goodness, together we were really kind of, weaving and opening doors that were amazing. At the beginning, really, the exhibition had about 1,000 objects that I wanted to show. And we started to, cut and cut and cut and cut and cut until we really ended up with about 50, which was, cut a lot of my darlings. But it just feels that at one point, after being beaten so many times with different doors, you want to open them.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I'm getting a notification that we have to move on to community questions, but I do just want to sneak in one more for Catherine, because I think you wouldn't have heard, Rebecca, but a laugh went through the audience when you said 1,000 objects on a checklist. And I'm thinking about, from the perspective of a curator who works within an institution, what are some of the challenges that emerged for you doing this kind of very community engaged work? And also what were perhaps some of the solutions and discoveries that you made?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I joined the DIA when the team was about midway through the process of community engagement. So probably the biggest challenge was not being directly involved in every stage and kind of learning what came out of those processes of the community consultant work and the focus groups kind of secondhand. I was part of the in-community consultations though. One example is so when the team was testing a working theme for the South Asian Gallery with an Indian American focus group, they were at the time thinking about a theme that very specifically related to Hindu sculptures and gods and goddesses in temples. And I don't remember the exact wording right now, but to me as a specialist in South Asian temples, it sounded very reasonable because our South Asian sculptures at the DIA were made for temples. According to the focus group report, many individuals in the focus group took issue with this because they were saying, what about all the modes of Hindu practice that don't occur in temples? What about those practices and beliefs that are not image focused? And so what we did is we kind of shifted how we expressed the idea so that it remained accurate to the sculptures from the collection, which were indeed made for temples, but we also kind of opened up how we presented this section of the gallery that's focused on Hindu sculpture to open it up to devotional practices in the home, beliefs and practices that might not be image focused. And we did that through a video, through one small sculpture we have that could have been for domestic worship rather than temple-based worship, and also through other interpretive elements in the galleries. And I do want to give credit to the team of interpreters that worked with me on the Asian galleries, Allison Jean, Swarupa Anila, and Alyssa Machida, because they were all very important part of the process in kind of working out solutions to the galleries.
Thank you. I have so many more questions, but I want to open it up to the floor if there are any questions here in our last few minutes before this panel comes to an end. If not, I can just fill it up with more of my questions, but.
I have a question for Catherine. So you mentioned your multiple hats, Asian art, Indian art, and Islamic art. In this process, I would like to know what was your approach working with Islamic or Muslim communities, and how you interpret within the Asian art and working with Islamic art. And as you know, Islamic art is also a broad spectrum, and we have objects from Spain, Italy, and North Africa. How does it fit in your overall approach? Thank you.
Absolutely. So just to clarify, the DIA's Islamic galleries opened in 2010. They're not part of this Asian galleries reinstallation, but I'm the curator that oversees all of these galleries and collections. However, we do the way the galleries are laid out, there's a point of entry that stands at the intersection of the Chinese gallery and the Islamic gallery, and then another place where the Islamic gallery intersects with the South Asian gallery. And we do, I'm thinking about ways to strengthen connections within those spaces between the galleries. Right now, we have a dynamic map at the intersection of the Islamic and Chinese galleries that kind of introduces the geography and examples of art making practices and languages from across the continent of Asia, focusing on different regions of Asia, including Central Asia and West Asia, which are part of the Islamic galleries. But then when you enter the Islamic galleries, you also encounter parts of the Islamic lands that are not part of the Asian continent. And, you know, we do our best to, you know, both show connections within and between the different regional cultures, cultural histories of the people and the art making practices that are in the galleries, as well as you know, focusing in on themes that are specific to objects and regions in the gallery. So I don't know how well that answers your question, but I can talk more to it later if you want. Is there another question?
I think we are out of time. So thank you so much to all three of you. I'm so grateful.